When the World Trade Organization was founded in 1995, there was a general consensus among the countries that trade was a positive tool for economic growth. The World Trade Organization has grown to have 164 member countries, with 22 more states negotiating to join the organization. And yet, growing trade tensions have been making headlines in the past few years. I spoke to the head of information and external relations at the WTO, Keith Rockwell, to understand what the future holds for global trade. Mr. Rockwell, welcome to Kazakhstan.
It's a pleasure to be here.
We're seeing, escalated trade tensions between the world's largest economies like the United States and China, and also increased trade sanctions against Russia and Iran. The trade wars have been making headlines and news in the past years worldwide. Is there crisis in global trade?
Well, we've seen, just on Monday, we released our most recent figures of the imposition of trade restrictive measures among just the G20 countries. Okay, that's a big chunk of the global economy, but not the entire WTO membership. And just within the G20, we saw more than $330 billion worth of trade affected by trade restrictive measures in the last 6 months, which means over the last 12 months, $819 billion worth of trade have been restricted by measures imposed among G20 countries. So it's something which is pervasive and very worrisome. We are seeing already that this is damping down growth in trade. We predict trade to expand by just 2.6%, which is 2 full percentage points down on where it was just 2 years ago. The International Monetary Fund says this is pushing pressure down on global growth. You're seeing central banks talking about trade frictions being a vitally important element of their monetary policy decision-making, which we haven't seen in decades. So yes, a big impact, and it's a worry.
The world trading system has been tremendously successful in many regards, but the current strain seems to be reflective of deep-seated problems. What do you think needs to be done to maintain the multilateral trading system and to reinvigorate the WTO?
I think multilateralism, generally speaking, has been under strain. Not strictly in the WTO, but if you look at the United Nations, if you look at climate, if you look at health, all of these areas that have been dealt with multilaterally over the past 7 decades or so are now facing some real strains. Now, one of the problems is that we have not been as responsive to our members as we should. We have 164 members, including Kazakhstan, and there is a need to try and improve the way we do things. We have not really changed our rule book in 25 years. Some important amendments, for sure, but there are big areas that are lagging behind, things like e-commerce, investment facilitation, ways to help smaller companies participate in the global economy. And then there are more general things that have been long-standing problems like trade and agriculture. So there are a whole range of things, even as far as decision-making goes, or how you determine what is a developing country. Some issues that have been really on the back burner for some time are now being pushed forward because of the strains on the system. So how it is we're going to be able to address these issues is an open question, but we have 12 months before our ministerial conference here in Nur-Sultan. That obviously will be a critical milepost in these reform efforts, and the efforts leading up to that should be very enlightening in terms of where it is we're going and what we can accomplish.
Mr. Rockwell, you just mentioned that the category of developing countries, or the definition of what a developing country is, has been sort of an issue among the members of the WTO. Could you please elaborate on it?
Well, it's a complex question, and it deals with things that go beyond trade. If you were to look at the basic indices of the World Bank or the United Nations, for example, China would be almost without any question at all considered a developing country. And if you go to neighboring China, the nearest part of China to Kazakhstan, you will see quite a lot of poverty. If you go to the east coast of China and you see Shanghai or Dalian or Shenzhen, you see these gleaming cities with high-tech infrastructure. But China is vast and complex, and it has many different facets to it. Other big countries are falling into this category too. Brazil has been considered a developing country, but the largest export from Brazil is aircraft. So the definition of what is a developing country has been blurred to a certain extent, and many developed countries are saying that these emerging countries should not be given special treatment in the WTO. Of course, these large emerging countries are pushing back quite hard and saying, look at our per capita income. Look at the subsidies our farmers receive on a per capita basis rather than on a cumulative basis. That's the more fair way to measure this. And so it's an ongoing debate, and it's come to the forefront now. How it's going to be resolved, I don't know, but what I would hope and expect is that the approach to this issue will be one that is pragmatic and thoughtful and not emotive.
One of the other challenges that the WTO is faced with is the crisis with its Appellate Body.
Yes.
With the looming prospect of it becoming dysfunctional by the end of this year, by losing 2 of its judges out of the 3 functioning. Why is it hard to renominate or nominate new judges? What is holding the organization from doing it?
Normally, we would have 7 Appellate Body jurists. You need at least 3 to hear any appeal. But for the last couple of years, the United States has been blocking the appointment of jurists as their terms expire. We're now down to 3, as you've said, and by December 11th, we'll be down to 1 if we can't find a solution. What the United States has said is that the Appellate Body has gone beyond its mandate, has affected the rights and the obligations of WTO members in ways which were not negotiated. The rest of the membership has responded and said, okay, let's talk about this. They've put forward at this juncture now about 12 or so proposals which address the U.S. concerns. To this point, the U.S. has not found these acceptable as yet. So we're in a case of limbo now, and what we've seen is the members, led by the European Union, are looking at a plan B. But in looking at options going forward, what they would like to do is use an arbitration means in the dispute settlement understanding to mirror the existing system of appeals so that we can have in place an appeal system which would not be identical to, but would replicate to a certain extent what we've seen in the Appellate Body. Whether this will be something that we will need to go to, at this stage we don't know. The process, an intensive process of trying to find a solution to this is underway, and we'll see where that goes.
The next ministerial conference of the WTO will take place in the Kazakh capital next year, which is the reason for your visit to Nur Sultan. How's the preparation going, and what is on the agenda?
Well, it's been great. Everything we've seen so far is extremely impressive. All the facilities are world-class, brand new, beautifully designed. So that is going really very well. Just in a couple of days here, we've come away very impressed. But how the conference itself turns out is not strictly down to logistics and management. We know that's going to be fine. The substantive part is for the members to try and sort out. And of course, in the WTO, most decisions that we take are on the basis of consensus. Very difficult to get a consensus. We have an array of issues on which an agreement may be possible. One very important negotiation that's underway here right now in Geneva is to do with applying disciplines to fishery subsidies. The estimate is that more than half of the world's fishing fleets would not be at sea were it not for government support. And we've seen that fishing stocks have been depleted by as much as 60%, for example, in the Mediterranean or in parts of the Indian Ocean, by 30% or more globally. And the concern is that if we don't address this, we won't have fish. So the members need to get together and sort this out. The leaders of 190 countries agreed in New York City in 2015 as part of the Sustainable Development Goals to reach an agreement disciplining these subsidies, that is to say, limiting them, capping them. That's very important. Beyond that, we're looking at hopefully getting something on agriculture, and then we have negotiations underway in some areas which are not, to which not all parties are participating. These are plurilateral negotiations, and they apply to electronic commerce and facilitation of smaller companies, investment facilitation, domestic regulation and services. These talks are going very well, and in fact, in 3 of these areas, e-commerce and investment facilitation and domestic regulation, the proponents would like to see an agreement struck here in Nur Sultan next year.
Well, good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
And your hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was the interview of the day with me, Lyazzat Shatayeva, and my guest, Keith Rockwell, the head of the Information and External Relations Department at the World Trade Organization.